And today our training session will be on the basics of podcasting, Part 1, with our special guest trainer, Media Exposure Extraordinaire, Kerry Heaps. And podcasting is one of the fastest ways and one of the most effective mediums for speakers and authors and entrepreneurs to communicate their expertise. And so I'm very excited to hear what Kerry is going to be sharing with us today. Now, Kerry is the president of Kerry's Network Incorporated, and she is the publisher of Strictly Marketing Magazine and the host of Strictly Marketing Talk Radio. And you can learn more about Kerry at www.strictlymarketingmagazine.com, and also visit the show notes within the description, and you can learn more about resources and membership platforms that Kerry offers. And at this time, I will be turning the segment over to Kerry so that she can provide you with the training for today. So I want to welcome Kerry and thank her for being in this session today. Welcome, Kerry.
Thank you, Alicia. It's always great to be here with you, and I'm very excited about this training to talk about podcasting today.
Well, I am excited, too, and without further ado, we would love for you to get into the training for today, so I am turning the platform over to you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, and I'm glad that everybody had an opportunity to tune in. Obviously, you've got an interest in podcasting if you are listening to this program, and I would just like for you, everyone, to suggest just grabbing a pen, sheet of paper, or a notepad and start taking some notes, because I am going to cover a lot in a very short period of time. This particular segment, I'm going to go over the beginning parts of starting a podcast. Number one, the goal of what your podcast is going to be. We're going to talk about the format of your show and also to the platform. And in the part 2, we're going to be discussing the next step after that. So definitely take lots of notes because we're going to cover a lot today. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. If you're looking at starting a podcast or, internet radio program, there's a couple of things to kind of keep in mind. Now, to give you a little background on why I'm doing this segment, I started my podcast back in 2009 on a platform called Blog Talk Radio, which is still around, and going strong. And I started my podcast to generate some revenue and to also kind of get more exposure with what we were doing within the business arena. So I've been podcasting for quite some time. We've moved around to a few different platforms over the years because obviously there's several more that have popped up. Back in 2009, I think Blog Talk Radio was one of the foremost platforms that was out there. And of course, since then, there's been several others that have popped up since then that are equally as good and have different options and features and so forth. So I've been doing this a long time, and I would say first and foremost, you really need to figure out what the goal of your show is going to be. For example, if you just want to use it to build your platform, to gain more attraction to your website, get more visitors, build up your email distribution list. Some people start podcasting because they want it to replace their regular income. They're looking at doing podcasting full time and want to be able to generate revenue from their show by selling advertising spots within the show and also on their website. So whatever the goal may be, there's no right or wrong answer to that question. You just kind of have to sit down and figure out, why are you wanting to do this? And the reason that is so important is because, and I don't think, and I can't stress this point enough, I don't think that people realize how much work actually goes into putting on a show. There's a lot of work involved. And if it's just you or just you and someone else that's going to be splitting up that work, it's still a lot. There's just a lot involved behind the scenes, and those are things that we're going to be discussing in this particular segment, not just this one, but also the other ones that are going to come after this about podcasting. So your goal is really important because you need to keep that in mind. And that's also going to help shape and formulate what you're doing moving forward as you start your podcast. For example, how often, how frequent your broadcast is going to be. if you're going to find guests or if you are going to be the one hosting the show and you're going to be the one talking and you're not going to have guests. So there's a lot of different things that factor into that. So first and foremost, figure out what your goal is. Now, if your goal is all of the above, that's great too. You can certainly build your platform, make some extra money while doing it, and eventually really monetize your show. I have had several people in the past ask me if, podcasting, how much money can I make from it? Will I get, is this something I can get rich off of? And the answer to that question always is and always will be, you can, but it's certainly not going to happen right away. It's definitely not a quick fix for financial reasons, if that's why you're doing it. In fact, you may have to invest some money into it to promote your podcast. So if your ultimate goal is to become a millionaire from podcasting, I'm not saying it can't be done, because it can. There's plenty of people that have done that and have had their shows syndicated and things like that. But it definitely doesn't happen right off the bat. So keep your expectations in line with your goals, and just a few things to keep in mind while moving forward. Some of the things that you need to take note of to ask yourself why you want this show, why you want to start a podcast, is what type of show are you going to host? Is it going to be a business show? Do you want to start a health and wellness show? Perhaps you're a financial planner and you would like to do a financial segment once a week or twice a week. Figure out what kind of show it's going to be, and what kind of information are you going to be offering? Are you going to do a segment where you're interviewing, guests for your show, or is it just going to be all about you and about your particular knowledge and what you can share with listeners? So those are some things that you need to jot down and figure out what you want to do with the show. It's very important because obviously if you are going to be getting guests, that does create additional work. There's additional things that are involved with that. And also, too, how frequently you want to do your show. I would recommend, if you're starting out, do a show once a week or once every other week. I would not start out with a daily show. I have hosted a daily show before, and it's basically tripling your workload. So in the beginning, I would recommend once a week or once every other week, do a 30-minute show. And it doesn't seem like it would be a lot, but again, there's a lot involved in the production, marketing, and if you are going to be finding guests. And then, of course, continually promoting your show. I recommend as a platform to start out, Blog Talk Radio is the perfect platform for you to try a new show, especially if you've never done podcasting before. There are tons of other platforms out there. You can use Podomatic, where you could pre-record your shows, but Blog Talk is a live feed, so you can broadcast your show live where people can call in. And they also have additional marketing capabilities built into their program. And the biggest reason is because you can do a 30-minute show once a week or once every other week at no charge. So you're not investing any money in it right off the bat. You might start doing this and feel it's not a good fit for you, or it's not something that you're willing to put in the time and effort into. And that's okay, because if it's not something that you're committed to, it's definitely not something that you want to continue forward with. So Blog Talk Radio would be the platform I would recommend wholeheartedly starting out, is to look at their platform. And you can go to their website at blogtalkradio.com and become a host, and just click on that link and they help you set up your show from there. Now, going back to what types of show you're going to host, again, really think about the content that you're wanting to provide. So, for example, if you really just want to build your platform, you're not interested in having guests. You have so much information that you can fill those 30 minutes or even 15 minutes and do a quick show on financial planning or on image consulting and just offer your expertise. Then you really need to kind of start looking at when you're going to have your show. If you do it once a week, maybe I started out on Thursdays at 10 a.m. from 10 till 10:30. And what I did is I filled up those 30 minutes with interviewing guests. But if it's just going to be you need to kind of write down each week, plan out an 8-week schedule in advance, which is something you should do anyway. And if it's just going to be you, in each Thursday at 10 a.m., if that's when you want to do your show, fill in what you're going to talk about that week or who you're going to interview, what you would like to talk about, who would be the ideal guest. Kind of come up with a production calendar for yourself. And I say 8 weeks because if you've never done podcasting before, I think 8 weeks is enough to see if it's something that's really working for you, if you like it, if it's producing results, if you're doing everything correctly, if it's producing results, and just giving it a really good chance. That's 2 months that you're giving your show just to see if it's going to be a good fit. You can always change your format later. That's the beauty of podcasting, is you can always go back later and change what you're doing. If you want to go from a weekly show to a daily show, you can do that. You have that option because you're in control of it. So keep in mind, you can always implement changes later. This is just something to kind of get your feet wet. So definitely put down for the next 8 weeks what it is that you would like to talk about. What message are you going to share? Also, too, you need to think about a really good call to action, because even if you're interviewing other guests, or this is just going to be to build your platform, to build up your email list, you need to have a really good call to action. And what do I mean by that? Well, let's just say you're doing 15-minute shows once a week on Thursdays, and you're offering tips and advice on whatever you are an expert on. And we'll say, for this particular example, we'll say you're an image consultant, and each week you offer 15 minutes worth of advice about image consulting, whether it's about wearing the right colors or what's in style, or what are some good office fashions to wear, this year, whatever the case may be. At the end of the show, you want to make sure that you have a call to action for the people who do listen to that 15-minute segment, because you don't just want to throw your expertise out there and not have anything come back to you. So, for example, a great call to action would be, we appreciate you tuning in this week. Tune in next week. We're going to be talking about, and you fill in the blank there of what the next show is going to be about. If you'd like to have more information or join our mailing list for additional tips, please visit our website at whatever your website is. So make sure that you're sharing that information. Have it in your show notes where people can click on a link. Have some type of call to action where you are getting people, you're inviting them to interact with you. Because even if you're interviewing other guests, you should always have, this show is sponsored by, and name your company. And even at the end of the show, have the same thing. Have some type of call to action to keep that keeping your pipeline full, getting people to go to your website, because you definitely want to use the platform to build your business, even if you're interviewing other experts on your program. So coming up with an 8-week calendar is very important. What you're going to talk about, if there's specific products that you're launching, you can kind of incorporate those into your timeline for those 8 weeks of what you're going to talk about, or you might be hosting a contest. There's several different ways that you can formulate that, but just to give yourself a really good head start for those first 8 weeks, that's very important. So I highly recommend writing out a production calendar for 8 weeks. The MC of your show, obviously, I recommend weekly or twice a month to start out with. I would not recommend doing daily because I think you're going to overwhelm yourself in the beginning. You can always switch later, and then you can always switch back if it's getting to be too much. How long the show will last, if it's going to be 30 minutes or an hour or even 15 minutes. I've seen tons of shows that are very successful that are under 30 minutes. So you figure out how long you want your show to be. If you are interviewing guests, I recommend 30 minutes or longer because you have to, have time to introduce them, interview them, and exit your show as well. So making sure you time that really well. If it's just going to be you, I would say 30 minutes or less. Even though most of us, we can talk for probably longer than 30 minutes on our topic of expertise, you would definitely want to keep it short because, again, you're going to be the only one talking. And the other thing that you need to consider, too, is go back and listen to your program. And I still do this. I get interviewed tons of times, and I do my own show as well, a weekly talk show on marketing. And I still go back and listen to my shows because there's always areas of improvement. So keep that in mind. You definitely want to make sure that you are improving your skills, your radio skills, and you're making sure, too, that you're not sounding too monotone. Those are little things that can make somebody tune out very quickly and just exit the show and not listen anymore. So have excitement in your voice. Obviously, you're going to be talking about something you're an expert on, and hopefully you're an expert on this subject because you're passionate about it. And that can come through on your, in your voice. And people want to hear that. They want to hear how excited you are about this topic. They're tuning in because they want to learn more information, but keeping them there for that full 15 minutes or hour or half hour is another story. And your voice has a lot to do with that. So definitely practice. That's something that you need to look at. So if it's just going to be you talking on the program, make sure that you've got some excitement in your voice. Inject some enthusiasm where needed. And if needed, write a script for yourself. I still do that with our show. I have show notes every week. We have show notes where we're making announcements, cutting to break, how we come back from a break, exiting the show, upcoming show guest. So definitely make sure that you have some type of outline or script that you can follow. And I've been doing this since 2009, and I still have a script for myself. So don't feel bad if you feel like you have to write out every word. Whatever you feel comfortable with. And keep in mind, too, usually it is live. It's internet radio, podcasting, and sometimes things happen. You'll hear background noise or you just might mess up a little bit, whatever the case may be. So, but just brush that off. That's going to happen. The other thing that you need to look at is, do you at some point want to generate revenue with your show? And the reason you want to start looking at that now is because if you do want to generate revenue, you have to have a longer format, at least 30 minutes, maybe up to an hour, so you have time for commercials. This show is sponsored by, and, you can do a 15-second commercial for one of your sponsors or advertisers for the show. So that's going to factor into how long your show should be, because if it's a 15-minute show, you're going to have a hard time selling advertising spots for that. So those are things that you need to consider. And also, too, with generating revenue, you definitely have to have a lot of people downloading your podcast. You need to be able to showcase those numbers to potential advertisers. So if you are looking at generating some revenue, one of the other things that you need to look at is you need to look at how you're going to be promoting your show. And that will be in another segment as well. So definitely look at, even if you think that you might want to produce some revenue from this show, even just to cover your cost that could be associated with advertising, or, to compensate yourself for your time that you put in to the show, even if it's just a maybe. Those are some things that you need to think about. You might want to extend the show a little bit. You might want to bring on some guest speakers, even if it's just once a month. So factoring that into all of the other questions that you need to ask yourself. The other thing that you need to think about is, do you want to host the show yourself, or do you want to hire a professional to do it for you? Some people do this, and it can work, and sometimes it doesn't. Obviously, if you hire someone, you're going to be paying them for their time, so that's something that you need to factor into. And some people feel like they just don't have a radio voice, that they sound too monotone, or they just don't come across in a good way in the recording. And just because that happens doesn't mean you can't have your show. You could always hire someone to host it for you. And there's several different ways you can do that. You can find someone that has done radio before. If it's just once a week, you can work something out with them where they could, be compensated for that particular hour. You can have everything written out for them and let them host your show. Sometimes, too, you can even, talk to the local colleges that have internship programs. Some of the kids that are going to school for media or communications would love to have an opportunity to have the chance to host a show, even though it's not theirs, where they can actually get some on-air experience and have those recordings to use, when they get out of school. So you can always have someone else. There's always a way around it. So you can always have someone else host the show for you. But that's something to consider, too. Most people want to host the show themselves, and that's great. And I think it's always good anytime you can do that, because people do hear your voice. They can hear, how you're an expert in this particular industry for whatever reason, and they get used to hearing you. They tune in on a weekly basis or biweekly basis. So if you can host it yourself, that is something I highly recommend. The next thing is, what can listeners expect from your show? Is this going to be an opinion-based show, an informational show, a learning show? Are you going to be bringing on guests, different guest experts to offer different information and different points of view? Is it going to be a political show? Is this going to be something that's more of a hobby-related show? For example, some people who are in the healthcare industry might want to do a show on acting, modeling and acting, or movies, and because that's a hobby for them. So you really need to figure out if I'm tuning in, if a listener is tuning in, what can they expect? Are they going to be educated? Are they hearing your opinion? Are they hearing other people's opinion? Are they getting educated by you? Are they getting educated by other people? So really kind of make up just a few sentences of what a listener can expect. And this is going to help you, too, with promoting your show, because the flip side of that is you need to, once you write that out, you need to kind of make a little avatar, mock avatar of who's the ideal listener. Is it young men and women in their 20s? Is it millennials? Is it people who are divorced or getting divorced, or people who have families? Really paint a detailed picture of who an ideal listener would be, because the ideal listener, whoever it is that you're trying to go after, if this is for you to build your platform for your business, then obviously you need to paint a picture of your ideal client, of who would listen. And then you can take your show and start posting that on different blogs and different websites where they're able to, those types of people are typically found. Or you can advertise in publications or blogs that, those particular people would go to for information. So you really need to paint a detailed picture of what a listener can expect, and then what your listener, or who your listener is. So those are two things that you also need to do. Lastly, you need to work on your budget for advertising and perhaps hosting fees. Now, obviously, when you start out on Blog Talk Radio, I recommend 8 weeks. Do a weekly or bi-weekly show, 30 minutes in length. Get used to it. Get your feet wet. Let's say 8 weeks pass, and you really like what you're doing. You really like the podcast. You want to grow it. You want to monetize it. You're getting clients from it. People are visiting your website. You want to make it go to the next level. You've got to have some sort of budget for, perhaps an upgraded hosting package to where you can get more impressions on your page, that might run you $30 or $40 a month. Or maybe you want to do a little bit of Facebook advertising, $25 a week. Or you create a Facebook fan page for your podcast, and you want to be able to advertise that in other places. Kind of pick a realistic budget, nothing too extravagant or over the top, but just you can always add to it later, just to get the word out about your podcast, to get more listeners, to get more potential clients. So again, going back to what I said before, to do a quick review, you want to figure out what's the goal of your show. Are you looking to interview people, make money off the show? Whatever your goals are, there's no right or wrong answer. That's completely up to you. And then what's the format going to be? Are you going to do weekly, bi-weekly, 30 minutes, 15 minutes in length, an hour? How long is your show going to be? Are you wanting to generate revenue from it? And then, also to the platform. You starting out on Blog Talk Radio is a great platform to start out with. Because that will be the easiest for you to kind of, get your feet wet and have other opportunities down the road. You can always move your platform, down the road. That's not a problem. So those are just a few of the things that you need to start thinking about if you are thinking about podcasting. Now, our next segment, part 2 with podcasting, we're going to be going over, once you have all of this detailed information down and you are ready to go, you've got your first show scheduled, we're going to be talking about finding guests and also to marketing your show, which is going to take up a lot of time. So definitely tune in for the next time, the part 2, when we talk about, continuing to build your podcast, and we're going to talk about finding guests and about marketing your show. I hope that you've enjoyed this segment, and so glad that you were able to tune in, and I hope you made lots of notes, but you can always go back and listen later if you need to. And as always, I'm wishing you continued success.